In a rivalry that Ann Richards would be proud of, the Houston Cougars and Baylor Bears match up again this weekend, renewing an old Southwest Conference fun game. I'm hoping both teams need one. Let's jump on into it first.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a crossover edition of Locked On Coogs and Locked On Baylor. I'm one of your hosts, Parker Ainsworth. I'm joined by Cameron Stewart. Cameron, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fantastic. I do like that you called it like the Ann Richards game more so than like the Art Briles Bowl or I don't know, Mac Rhodes Bowl.
We don't need to talk about Art Briles.
No, we don't. We got one. Yeah. I appreciate the Ann Richards one. A Waco native too, so we love that.
There you go. There you go. Folks, we're laughing because if you don't laugh, you cry. It's been a rough year for both programs.
For sure.
We're going to talk
basketball today. I was getting excited.
Yeah.
And Mark tried to bring me back down. He's like, no, still football. I was like, that's the game this weekend. Gotcha.
That's how we tricked him with us. So we're going to talk all about LJ Cryer. No, just kidding. Gotcha.
I'd love to.
No. So, and that episode will come out, I'm sure, later in the year. No, we need to talk about this matchup first. And then, as it's been a rough year, the coaching matchup that I think may belong on the ESPN plus Deportes all the way in the back.
The
Ocho. And then at the end, we'll talk about if 57.5 points is more points than this game can actually possibly score. But first, Cameron, I got to ask you, football is a weird game. There are 22 players between the offense and defense.
The ultimate team sport.
There are good players on the Baylor football team. Frankly, they almost beat Utah. So talk me through who's important to look out for Houston Cougar that we might not know about on Baylor Bears.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure Blake Shapen, the quarterback, I mean, that's the one who's probably the most noticeable, not like he's a Heisman candidate or anything, but that's been the most consistently good player for Baylor all season. I mean, there's been holes everywhere on the field, running game, offensive line, outside receiver, and don't even get me started on the defense. So offensively, it's Blake Shapen. If he gets the time in the pocket, he kind of makes things happen on his own. Now, the downside for Baylor is they finally had gotten some production out of Ketron Jackson at outside receiver, a transfer in from Arkansas. He's out for this game with a concussion. Or at least we haven't gotten that confirmed, but Dave Aranda said on Monday that's probably not going to happen. He's not going to play. So it's going to be a kind of a one-dimensional offense, and that one dimension that you got to look out for other than Blake Shapen, because, skill guys, is Monterey Baldwin. He is the slot receiver, one of the fastest guys in college football. He scored on a 60-yard jet sweep in the Sugar Bowl a couple years ago. It was like his second touch of the year. No one knew who he was. Now they know. So those are the two guys, and they have a great connection. At times, they look like the only guys trying on the team. So those are the guys to look out for. And I know on Houston's side, there's someone we're a little familiar with Donovan Smith, the former Red Raider.
Yeah, Donovan Smith. I probably should know more about how he performed against Baylor, but around the conference, people recognize the name for sure, right?
He had a decent game, yeah, in 2021. He had a good game against Baylor.
Dine's the guy. He's taking the snaps. He's running less this year than I thought we were going to get when he came in from Tech. For the Baylor Bear fans that maybe haven't seen him or whatever in person, he is a daunting figure, 6'5", 245, 250, rushing quarterback. Dual threat guy for sure. He uses it very sparingly this year. He's trying to really make reads from the pocket, and he's flustered and he'll move around behind the line of scrimmage some, but he doesn't go downfield a whole lot with his legs. The big thing for Houston has really been he's got a trio of wide receivers that are really good, really really good. And frankly, if we can get him time to get them the ball, we've scored some points. So I would say Sam Brown's leading the conference in yards. Joseph Manjack is a big, strong 6'4" type guy. He's got 4 touchdowns in the year. And then Matthew Golden has 6 touchdowns in the year, even though he hadn't had the yards and catches I think we thought he might have coming in. But the big flaw for us has been having time to get those guys open. I don't know.
I get that. Yeah.
What's the Baylor front seven look like? What kind of pressure are they putting on?
Pressure. That's a good one. I like that. That was optimistic. Yeah. There's not a lot. There's not a lot of push up front from Baylor, really on either line, but specifically on the defensive side. There's not really a lot of push in the run game or in the pass game. They have a guy, Gabe Hall, who's supposed to be an all Big 12 player, this freak athlete. And I mentioned on my show earlier this week, but he was excellent when there was two other guys that the team was game planning for on the line. Now that it's him, not really making much of an impact. So I think that is something that might fall into Houston's benefit this week, is that there isn't much of a pass rush. And Donovan Smith, a guy we've seen before, looks a lot like TJ Finley, the guy who transferred from Auburn to Texas State and walked into Waco and had himself a night in week 1 and barely busted out the run game, but he's such a tough guy to bring down. So yeah, I think there's going to be some time back there for Donovan to throw, is what I'm saying.
That'd be a welcome change. Don't you love that when this brotherly welcome in the conference? Oh, here's some time. Why didn't everybody do that?
We're neighborly up here. I have never had anything bad happen to me in Waco, and we're just going to keep that kindness rolling for the Coogs this weekend.
Right, so the Chip and Joanne way, right? That's the way to go about things. The Magnolia way there in Waco. On the defense, you mentioned that it's not a great pass rush or anything like that. Again, it's an 11-man defense. There are, got to be talent somewhere. If the defense makes a play, who is it?
Yeah, so, I mean, the strongest part about Baylor's defense is their defensive backfield, which is super young. So mistakes are happening. And this is one of the deepest receiving cores they've played all year. But the guy that I look out for is Caden Jenkins. He's a true freshman. He won, I think, national, but also Big 12, definitely Big 12. I think national newcomer of the week defensively in the win against UCF. He has a scoop and score touchdown. He's got a couple picks. He's a playmaker back there. He's not, I don't know that he's a lockdown guy just yet. In fact, he did not have a great week this past week against Iowa State, but overall, he is a playmaker back there and will get them back into games because of his playmaking. So that's the guy, a guy that I'm familiar with his high school. We talked about this a little bit off air, but Matt Jones, the linebacker, Odessa Permian product, will be all over the field. And when he is not in the right lanes or if he's freelancing, you see it because he's so integral to Baylor's defense. But he's a guy who, in fact, I think he might be their best pass rusher at this point.
At the Mike linebacker spot.
And he's a Mike linebacker. Exactly. So he's a guy who can get shot out of a torpedo, make some plays mainly in the run game, which is where they really need it. But yeah, those are the guys to look out for. And I know for Houston, it's a similar kind of defense, which unfortunately in this case isn't much of a compliment.
It's a defense that's given up a lot of points. I will say I feel like it's schematically might be the inverse. I like our defensive line a lot. And then our defensive backfield's kind of coming together, hadn't played together a lot. We're filling gaps at linebacker, I think. Truthfully, the pass rush of like a Nelson Caesar, a Dot Nwankwo, Chidozie, a Dot Nwankwo are guys to look out for as far as, if you're hearing Houston Cougar names called, they can get after
that could be a big benefit. I mean, this is not a good offensive line on our end either. It's gotten better the last few weeks, but overall it is very civvy, if you will.
Well, but when you mention a lot of speed at the slot receiver position, that's worrisome. I will say, and pulling stuff up here on the side, it looks like, our defensive backs are all about 5'9", 5'10". Looks like Monterey is only about 5'9", 5'10". So at least we're not getting boxed out like a rebound in that.
Right. He's my size with, granted, a lot more speed and a lot more pure muscle. But yes, he's a slight lad.
He can really run, is what you're saying.
He can. I'm telling you, he's one of the fastest guys I've ever seen on a football field.
Am I saying that he hit 22 miles an hour? So 22.8 miles an hour, something like that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's pretty fast. He's pretty
fast, man.
Speaking of pretty fast, if you're looking to get some fast wins, how's that for a transition? If you get some fast wins, make sure you go to PrizePicks.com and go through there and find all the different ways you can win a daily fantasy sporting goods with all kinds of like stats. They give you overs and unders for various things. You can get passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards. If you think this would be a high scoring game, because both those talk poorly about the defenses, go in and find different ways to go over and under different statistic models. They come in, you can get up to 25 times your money back on various football statistics. A big thing, though, for PrizePicks is that they have this injury insurance. You can get a guy rebooted, right? So if you get a guy that gets hurt in the first half, like, oh, there goes my whole daily fantasy. It does not have to be that way with PrizePicks. You get your money back. It keeps on moving through. Now, all those different stat types things only get to, whatever you're gambling on, you got to go to a state that you're in, put the money down on the over and under. But if you go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit you get a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Now, I got to say, I stumbled through that because I'm a little nervous about the statistics here as we move on, because I feel like this could be an offensive shootout, a high-scoring kind of game because of the defenses. Before I get into talking about our defensive coordinator, I want to ask Cam. Dave Aranda lost a string of games to end the year last year.
Yeah. He did.
He had one of the more, I think we've realized Texas State is good, but certainly in weekend one, it looked like one of the more embarrassing losses of the year to start the year this year. I didn't know Long Island had a football team.
Yeah, you and me both, man. This is 2 years in a row we beat a team that I didn't know how to football program. Yeah.
Are either one of are both of these coaches going to be employed on Monday?
It's a great question. I'll put it this way, though, and I don't know about Monday, but I think the powder blue jerseys will last longer than Dave Aranda at Waco. I do. And it just feels like the end of the road with Aranda. And by no means has he been terrible, but this program is moving in the wrong direction. It just didn't capitalize on the success it had in 2021 when he came in with a lot of guys, almost the entire team as guys that Matt Rule had recruited and had started and given them their start. And Dave, granted, turned them into winners. They did something Rule never did, which was beat ranked teams. They did it 5 times in that year, won the Big 12, won the Sugar Bowl, just kept taking them one step further than Rule had. But since he's been able to bring in his guys, his coaches, his players, his transfer portal mantra, it has not been good. It's been going downhill. 4 straight losses to end last season. Not a good start to this season. Have not beaten an FBS team at home in over a year. They are 1-4 at home this year, which is just downright embarrassing. And they haven't really been close in almost any of those games except Utah, weirdly enough. But it's just not the product that we were promised, both in identity and in results on the field. So the big question here at Baylor is whether they can afford the buyout because they signed him to a big extension in 2021 when all those top tier head coaching jobs were open and he is coming off the most successful season in Baylor history. They locked him up and now they might have to literally pay that price. So we'll see, but I know it's similar thoughts down there in H-Town too.
Yeah, you mentioned buyout. I think that's like a trigger word for a lot of Houston Cougar fans these days.
That's our sport now. It's just
that's our sport.
Conference realignment, NIL, buyout. That's it.
Well, and when you have the head, so in Dana Holgerson's case, for the Baylor folks listening that don't necessarily know, he openly admitted that he thought he had a bleeping impossible buyout. Very literally is what the quote was. And I don't know that he's wrong in doing the math on it. His contract's fully guaranteed. And so that means that essentially, if you were to give him the axe, you'd be paying 2 coaches at a time. I don't know that they're axing him at the end of the season or not. I feel like they're going to need to make some big changes at the end of this season.
So you don't know if they're going to. Should they give him the axe at the end of the season?
I would want to know who the other options are. I'd want to know who's out there and available. And I frankly wouldn't want to give myself time to give a deep dive into like who the up and coming smaller schools in the state have. Because it's
a process, isn't it?
A couple of years ago, I thought like, oh, the UTSA guy is building it up. And then like the last couple of years, I've been like, oh, I think Houston's in a better spot than that. But like this, you mentioned Texas State, is that worth giving a look to? Yeah.
Yep, name only year 1, but still, I mean, he was a hot name at that level, with Incarnate Word, what he built there. So that's a possibility. Traylor's another one I thought of down at UTSA. I don't know because he turned down Tech 2 years ago, but it's something to watch out for. He's probably done all he can do at UTSA.
Yeah. My worry is that if he came in and flopped, you'd have a lot of disgruntled people very quickly because Houston has beaten UTSA 2 years in a row. We've been probably closer than they should be, but for a Power 5 program versus a UTSA program, right? But I gotta say though that like I don't know how many coaches have come through Houston and gotten to lose to Rice and stick around very long, right? So like at the end of the day, that some of that counts as well. I'd imagine, you know how this goes, right? Someone gets thrown to the firing squad first.
Right.
And I'd imagine that's the defensive coordinator, just because we don't have an offensive coordinator that's technically also Dana. So I guess he doesn't officially have that title, but you know, if there's some way that Aranda's not fired this season, what kind of a big change is Baylor going to make?
That's the thing, man. I don't know what it is. He's already hired, fired, and rehired offensive coordinator. He has hired, fired, and hired a defensive coordinator who's also the special teams coordinator. So he's had the chance. I think about another old UH guy, but Tom Herman in his last year at UT before that year or after the season before, I guess they basically said, "Hey, get rid of your staff, bring in another staff. This is your last shot." And everybody knows that, right? When the whole staff's gone, that this is it. If you don't pull up something big this year, you're done. And it didn't happen as dramatically for Dave Aranda, but you look at it and you're saying these are all his guys in the building. You know, he came in and he had Joey McGuire with him and got to keep a fair bit of a staff from rules guys, which was pretty rare for a guy that went to the NFL. And then Joey took all those guys with him when he went to Tech. And so in the span of, you know, a year, they were basically all gone from two regimes, basically. And so I just don't know what that other option is. If it's not firing Aranda, I don't know that they fire anybody.
It's an interesting way to go about it too, because if they've already, it almost seems more ominous. If they've already done that move,
it was a show me what you got year. He fired the defensive coordinator after last season, which everyone wanted the offensive coordinator out. So it's put up or shut up time, and it has not gone well.
It's not gone well. Been not a whole lot of putting up.
It's not a lot of putting up. That's right.
You know,
but not enough shutting up from me.
No, Houston's one of the few Big 12 new programs that has beaten an incumbent program. And that was on a Hail Mary versus West Virginia. Although I maintain they should have won that game earlier than that, but they did. They, you know, Hail Mary.
They count the same.
They count the same. We're
not BCS anymore. This counts the same.
They do count the same.
Yeah,
very, very technically. I've put a lot of weight in this week for the Coogs show on this game because I feel like Houston's got 4 games left. Making a bowl game would be massive, massive, massive for this program to get another month of practice, frankly. They have Central Florida and Cincinnati later in the season that are, you would think, like-sized schools. What kind of pressure is there, before we get into the nitty-gritty on this week's game, what kind of pressure is there going into this week for yourself?
I mean, it's a lot of pressure. For those who are still invested in this season, which it's not everybody in the fan base. I mean, they can't expect much, especially with how we've played at home. It's just been awful at home. And so I know in that building, it has to feel like that, not the least of which being Mac Rhodes is in Dave's office and he wants to beat UH too. Right. And so it would be a bad look on Mac if he comes in and, second year or first year in the Big 12, Houston comes in and beats his new place. So it's big because I think while most of the fan base doesn't think they're going to make a bowl game and go 3-1 down the last 4, they see one game that might be a win, and it's this weekend. And I know Houston's probably thinking the same thing, like you had kind of just said. So it really is that kind of pressure of we don't expect much, but if you can't beat Houston, or on the flip side, if you can't beat Baylor, what are we doing here? Kind of pressure, if that makes sense.
No, there's a ton of pressure. And if I don't know what to make of it, but if someone out there listening thinks they know what to make of it, I'd recommend going to FanDuel.com and figuring out where you want to put your money on that one, because you can score early this football season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets for winning any $5 bet. You got $5 in your pocket right now? Do you have $5, Cameron?
I do, barely, but yes, 5 ones, but yeah.
Well, I don't want to ask about the ones, but if you take that $5 and take it somewhere, put it down on whatever you think is going to happen in this game. And you're right, you can get $150 back. They currently have the line at 3.5 Baylor's way. The over-under is set at 57.5, but you're looking at that money line. They got Baylor at minus 182 and Houston at plus 150, I'm sorry. And if you go to FanDuel.com and put something on that $5, like Cameron's got on that money line, instead of wherever he's going to use those ones, then you can win $150 back in bonus bet money. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to kick off the season. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right. I mentioned the line is 3.5.
3.5.
That is super close for for these two programs. I want to focus though on that over under because I think 3.5 is nearly a pick 'em. It's not quite a pick 'em. It's nearly a pick 'em. 57.5 feels because of the way we both talked about our defenses this episode. Feels low, does it not?
It does. In fact, when I first thought about this game, just before looking at any numbers, I'm like, these two teams stink. This is gonna be a rock fight, right? This is gonna be a 23-20 maybe. And then I look and I'm thinking, well, our defense sucks, so hopefully it's 23-20. And then I look more and I'm like, well, both these defenses suck. And the thing too is, you don't have two of the best quarterbacks in the conference or anything, but they're two quarterbacks who have played a lot of football and can make plays. So I kind of lean towards the side of experienced quarterbacks versus inexperienced and bad defenses in defensive backfield specifically. So I look at that and say, maybe that is low. I could see this just getting into a wild vintage Big 12 game that the people at College Game Day still think is the Big 12. This could be like a 36-33, like the West Virginia game. I mean, it could just get nuts.
Yeah. The West Virginia game was nuts because there was barely any scoring for 3 quarters, and then both teams put up like 20 pieces in the fourth. And it was a Thursday night. I mean, put it in my veins. It was awesome.
West Virginia on a Thursday night is one of the most dangerous teams in the country. So that's a big signature win.
Complete. One, it's Dana's whole life. That's been Dana's whole life. That's why it's sponsored by Red Bull.
By the way, Dana, my favorite quote that I heard from him was, it was that week, and someone was like, "This has to be bulletin board material for West Virginia." And it was a quote from Dana saying, if we want to win the way we want to win here, I'm not recruiting kids from West Virginia." I'm like, the man tells the truth. I mean, come on. You want to recruit kids from West Virginia or want to win football games?
Oh, but that's ultimately
great,
right. Completely. Where then the West Virginia quarterback, when he thinks he's won the game, is like yapping with the stand. Like, because, all of that was bubbling up all over West Virginia's sideline.
It was one of the great college football games of the season.
But that's the fun of
that for sure.
That's the fun of this. And frankly, this is somewhat of a sidebar. I wish Baylor and Houston were having more fun years because the fans and listeners that were around in the 80s and 90s remember this as a very different rivalry, right? And frankly, your Baylor Bear fans might not want to hear this. There's a lot of Houston folks that really are, very anti-Baylor because of the way the Big 12 thing went down, right? Like they still hold on to that, right? If they were both good football teams, getting to actually have some like vitriol all putting together towards a meaningful game in the big scheme of things. Obviously, it's meaningful to both coaches and their jobs and the schools or whatever. But it would have been, I think, a little bit more fun. I'm going to put a prediction out here.
Okay.
I think Houston wins. I think Houston wins like a 42-38. I think it's high scoring.
Okay, we're getting nuts.
And I think the truth is that my defensive line's the difference. They make 1 or 2 key plays in the second half. Cam,
closers.
I'm imagining you're flipping the script on that one a little bit. I'm interested to see why.
Yeah, I'm going to because you know why I'm doing it, Parker? Because I'm a sucker. I really am. Every week by Wednesday or Thursday, I just talk myself into Baylor winning the game. And most weeks I'm wrong. But I just think they can do enough offensively. There has been flashes, if not whole games, where the offenses look good the last 4 weeks, with one exception in there. They sucked against Tech all the way around. But there were some flashes last week, even in a bad game against Iowa State, that this defense was still, the offense was still moving in the right direction. And so I think kind of the way you're saying it. I think they just make enough plays. Like, there's nothing strategic that I think either team is just going to beat the other one into submission with. I think it's just going to come down to making enough plays. And it reminds me, this matchup on paper reminds me a lot of the one we had with Cincinnati 2 weeks ago, which was exactly that. We outlasted them. We were up 2 scores, let them back into it to make it a 32-29 game. And that's the final. It's not pretty. It's not the best red zone offenses in the world, but Baylor gets it done. So I think that with Blake Shapen's accuracy this year, just through his first pick of the season last week, I think that gets Baylor over the hump. I'm thinking like a similar high scoring, but like 38-33.
So I got to ask, we're both going so high scoring.
Yeah.
But Vegas has this as two teams in the 20s.
It's going to be 19-14 because we're doing
Are we just dumb? Like, what's happening there? What are we
We're
missing?
either too smart for our own good or we're really dumb. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. I've seen this defense play week in, week out, and I can't see them holding a team under 20 points. I just don't see it. And I've seen Donovan Smith play before. Again, not a ton this year, but I've seen him play before. And so I just see 2 incompetent defenses out there. That's why.
Well, and again, it'll be, like I said, I think ultimately our defense line makes a play or two, but I see a quarterback that's very accurate. I see a receiver that's really fast. I see a troublesome combination. I don't know how this game stays below 60, let alone the 57.5. I don't get it. When we're wrong and people want to tell us we're wrong, where can people find you at?
Yeah, that's a great point. You can find me. I mean, they love doing it at Locked On Baylor, but at Real Cam Stuart, which is STUART. I like to think I'm funny, so it's not just sports tweets all the time. A lot of them are disingenuous. Please don't take me too seriously. But yeah, that's where you can find me. If you're a UH fan here in the Central Texas area, me and Drake Toll does Locked On Baylor co-host a show, even though it's called the Drake Toll Show, on ESPN 1660 weekdays from 12 to 2, where we're talking a lot more general Big 12 than just Baylor. And also if you're, Rangers fan and their season might be over by the time this drops. I know Parker's a big Rangers fan, but Cowboys and things like that. We talk about that too, but that's the best place to find me.
Yeah.
And Parker, for my guys, where can we find you?
Oh, I'm at Painsworth 512, PAINSWORTH 512, on all different social media platforms. I don't call it X. Mama call it Twitter. I call it Twitter, but all the different
formerly
things.
Known as Twitter.
Yeah, formerly known as Twitter. I still get those when I get an email from Twitter. So that's formerly known. I will say that I got the last question before we get out of here. How'd you let Drake name the show after himself?
I don't know. Drake's telling the people that it's filling their heads with ideas that it was my idea. I don't know. I didn't have enough to say in that one, but he was like, I need an uncancelable name. I'm going to call it the Drake Toll Show. You know what it's like? It's like the band Daughtry. Remember Chris Daughtry in American Idol? He doesn't win, but he comes out and he's like, hey guys, you're going to be in the band. But it's going to be called me. Okay. That's essentially what Drake did. He just walked in, named the show after him. And I have to live with that. It's my cross to bear.
The crosses and bearing and Waco and all that. I'm
all of it. Some things never change. Never.
On that note, thanks for making Locked On Coogs or Baylor your first listen of the day. For a second listen, go listen to Drake at Locked On Big 12. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And I'm going to wrap up with Go Coogs. Y'all say sick 'em?
I was going to say sick 'em Bears, yeah.
Go Coogs.